Daamid ja Herrat. It is my great pleasure to welcome you as co-president of Tartu College to the 53rd anniversary of its founding in 1970. I wish to also welcome our guest speakers, the director of Obamu Museum of Occupations and Freedom, Karen Yogidin, who will open today's exhibition, and Dr. Venlo Soot's Memorial Lecture Series speaker, Christina Reinsalu of the Estonian E-Governance Academy. It's also my honor to pass on greetings from our past president of Tartu College in Vemu, Jaan Meri, kes ütleb soojemad Hispaania õnnesoovid Tartu College'ile. Nii et ta on puhkusel. We thank him for his many years of work and his dedication to Tartu College and wish him a well-deserved retirement. The vision of Tartu College, which architect Elmar Tambul had, was to not only create a student residence that would serve the local university community, but it would also be a unique home for the Estonian fraternities and sororities in Toronto, with support and funding from those Estonian academic organizations. Tartu College became a reality. Tartu College is still a cultural focus point for the Estonian community today. It is the home of VEMU, the Estonian Museum of Canada, which is the main organizer of today's event. It's more than a building, however. It's a testament to the many volunteers and to those that worked at Tartu College over the last 53 years. In a few minutes, we will present a short video that illustrates the passion of a person that has been involved with the planning, building, and life of Tartu College since the very beginning. Dr. Venlo Soot graduated cum laude from the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics at the University of Toronto in 1959. He obtained a master's degree from the University of Illinois and obtained his doctorate in 1964, again, University of Toronto. He was a long-time employee of the Ministry of Transportation for Ontario in the Transportation and Energy Planning Division. Dr. Venlo Soot joined the fraternity Corpus Sakala in 1955. He was a leader in the Estonian Scouting Unit, Lembitu Malev, one of the founders of Metsa Ülikool, Kohtla-Järve Forest University in 1966 and 67. At Tartu College, he was a board member and chairman. At the same time, he was a member of Tartu Institute, the academic body of Tartu College, and the University of Tartu Foundation in Canada. He was a lover of nature, member of the Ontario Federation of Naturalists, chairman of the Mycological Society of Toronto, and the video you're about to see is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Venlo Soot. Lõpetuseks tahan tänada südamest neid, kes Tartu College'ile elu andsid ja ka nendele, kes töötavad täna Tartu College'i heaks. Ivat Restorforiat, Tartu College.
Hello, I'm Piret Norhani, the Chief Archivist of WEMO Estonian Museum Canada, and I will be your MC today. Thank you, Allan, for your first speech as a Tartu College president at Tartu College birthday. We have used the Jaan's speeches before, and that presentation was also put together by Jaan Meri, dedicated to Vello Sots. We have a couple of speakers today, and first I'd like to invite our ambassador, Estonian ambassador to Canada, Mr. Markus Rava, to say a few words. Markus, please.
Aitäh Piretile, lugupeetud Allan Meret ja ladies and gentlemen, tere tulemast külalistele Eestist. Ma kajaks vastu kahel teemal hetkeks. Üks on see, mida me kogesime täna mõnedega teist Burlingtonis Hamiltoni külje all, kus sealne kogudus avas muljetavaldavalt kena mälestusmärgi kodumaalt eelmise sajandi keskpaigas lahkunud mälestuseks. See on nüüd teema, mis puudutab teid kõiki, meid kõiki, ka üks minu sugulastest tuli põgenemisega Kanadasse. See on teema, mis oli päevakorras ka eile, kui Ukraina president Zelenski külastas Ottawat. Some of the topics that I would like to touch upon have to do with the issue that some of us experienced earlier today in Burlington near Hamilton, where the Estonian congregation opened a very impressive monument to the ancestors, or their ancestors, your ancestors, our ancestors, that had to escape Estonia to Canada in the middle of the last century. The same topic was evident yesterday when President of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, was in Canada. And after his speech in Parliament, which I also had the chance to see, leaving the building, I saw a crowd of Ukrainians, big part of whom again were unfortunately refugees due to the aggression that President Putin of Russia has launched against Ukraine. So the memory of ancestors is something that has come to my mind a lot during these days. Also the memory of Dr. Sots. Now the museum called Vabamu also has to do it. It has to do with keeping in mind what was the history of Estonia for a long period of time, and what is the actual state of Estonia, and what has been the transition. You will hear a lot about it in detail. The only thing that I would like to tell is that the work that the museum does is also echoing in a cooperation that has been set up during past 2 years between Toronto University and the University of Tartu. There is a program called Creative Destruction Lab that helps startup companies to grow into big proper enterprises. It was started in Toronto University, and now a couple of people who are also connected with the Vabamu Museum got the same program established also in Estonia. And one of these people, Sten Tamkivi, told last June for the audience of 1,000 people here in Toronto, all startups and mentors and investors, that after the war in Ukraine started in February last year, full scale, the people from Canada asked him whether we should go ahead with creating this CDL chapter in Estonia. And he said, No, we don't have any doubts. It's even more necessary now than before, so that Canadians know what is the history of Estonia, where we come from, and what is the life in Estonia like nowadays. So this is, well, in brief, my couple of thoughts that I wanted to share with you regarding the memories of our ancestors, which have now evolved into something big and beautiful, be it Tartu College, Vabamu Museum, or the digital society that Estonia now has. Kena päeva kõikidele, thank you for coming, have a nice day.
Tartu Kolledž on nagu kodu. Tartu Kolledž on Eesti kultuuri kodu. Or in English, because we have English-speaking people around us today. Tartu College is like a home. It is the home of Estonian culture. Said one of the interviewee when we were collected stories about the history of the building on the occasion of Tartu College 50th anniversary. Tartu College is also home for Vemu. Vemu has the largest Estonian-themed collections outside of homeland. And we have been the main and most active cultural center in Toronto for almost 15 years. We bring together not only Estonians, but also our friends and partners from very different ethnic backgrounds. However, in terms of the number of employees and the budget, Vemu is a small institution, and without good partners here in Canada, Estonia, and elsewhere, we would not be able to achieve everything we do. Many people have also contributed to the success of today's event, but I would like to name some of them. The Estonian Embassy, headed by the Ambassador Margus Rava, and especially the Trade and Economic Affairs Counselor Liina Tomlinson, thanks to whom we managed to find an exciting speaker for the Vello Sots Memorial Lecture today from Estonia, Kristiina Reinsalu. So give my thanks to Liina, please. Liina also had to help to spread the word about this event here, and especially about the exhibit, which would stay with us until the end of February next year. I would also like to thank the director of Vabamu Museum and Vabamu Museum of Occupation and Freedom, Karen Jagodin, who came up with the idea of bringing this fascinating exhibit to Canada, and even took the trouble to fly here. I hope that our guests will be inspired by the activities of Canadian Estonians, just as we are inspired by your activities at home. And of course, we are very, very grateful to our speaker today, Kristiina, because she had a very short notice to make a decision. She had to change all her plans in Estonia, but she's with us here today. And we'll talk about how Estonia is doing digitally in our days. Who is Kristiina? Kristiina Reinsalu is a senior expert at the e-Governance Academy. She deals with initiation, planning, implementation, and monitoring of local, national, and international projects on digital engagement and open governance, and on how ICT can support these processes. Local democracy is Kristiina's passion, as she sees it as a test bed for democracy innovations. She has led projects promoting open governance and e-tools for democracy in Eastern Partnership countries such as Georgia, Moldova, and others, and consulted municipalities in Estonia, Latvia, and elsewhere on open governance and participatory budgeting. Her most recent project measured the impact of e-participation initiatives and how citizens' engagement helps cities to become more resilient in facing Green Deal challenges. Christina holds an MA in Public Relations and a PhD in Media and Communications. She speaks many languages. Today she will speak English, and the title of her presentation is Digitization as Driver for Innovation and Social Change. Please.
Hello, it's my pleasure. I'm honored to be here and nice to see you all here and dear ambassador, dear guests. I'm really, as said, I'm going to talk about digitalization as driver for innovation and social change. Digitalization definitely has been one of the stories what has done Estonia much bigger than we are as a country, really. And as you know, technology is really a powerful tool. However, to implement it for the service of democracy and citizens, you need to have many requirements in place. And Estonia as a country, 30 years ago, when we just regained our independence and freed us from Soviet occupation, did really many right decisions, many smart decisions in order to digitalize, to really make our small country bigger. And you will see this Estonian e-Estonia story in more details later when you follow the exhibition. But what I also want to mention is that I'm sharing this e-Estonian story not from perspective of technical expert. I'm rather sharing this Estonian story as an engagement expert, as an expert who really deals with how much average citizens are really benefiting from this technology and technical change. And I'm really observing and sharing this from really citizen perspective. How much we are benefiting from this change. Just few words. It was basically said all already earlier, but just to mention or point it out or emphasize really that my focus is not on technology, really, because my background is media and communication. I rather look at things how technical developments have been communicated, how aware citizens are about all those possibilities technology offers. And yes, I have been for almost 20 years actually now consulting and supporting governments, local governments across the world, really to implement technology to build secure, inclusive, transparent societies, as Estonia has been doing. Also a few words before we are going to this e-Estonia story about my organization. I'm coming from e-Governance Academy Estonia. Well, the name is a bit misleading because we are not an academical organization, we are not a government organization. We are non-profit organization, mission-based, project-based, and our main mission is really to create and share knowledge and best practices on digitalization, sharing Estonian best practices and how we did and what we did in order to have this successful digital state everybody knows us for, and also really to focusing on how technology can support democracies. This is just overview, just some facts that we are really working with more than 140 countries. You can see on the maps that we are really covering most of the world. Of course, supporting more young democracies, developing countries, because they are struggling by the end technology, as I said several times, and probably will be repeating it because it is so important that, well, technology can be powerful, tool also in hands of anti-democrats or autocrats, but we really focus and try to do our best to support that it will be empowering citizens and increase and improve democracy across the world. Of course, those days, one of our focus countries is Ukraine. So my colleagues in academy, we have very strong cybersecurity programs, so my colleagues work. We have also a Ukrainian team. We have a country office also in Kiev right now also, and locally recruited people who work for Ukrainian cyber army, really supporting and trying to make this country as resistant it is possible right now. So, but now to this Estonia story, I know I'm intriguing a bit here because, yeah, at the same time we can say, and I say, and this exhibition shows, and you know and hear it everywhere that yes, Estonia is indeed a success story, and I will give you many examples what prove this. At the same time, we and those who are Estonians, you know how critical and self-critical we are Estonians. So at the same time, we can really say that, well, maybe we were a success story, maybe we are not anymore, maybe we need to do very bold next steps in order to justify this status and identity. So I'm also telling you, I'm not telling you only about nice, shiny milestones. I'm also trying to cover or tell you the story or the past, showing also the stones and bumps and big challenges we are facing right now on this path. And of course, I'm also asking and sharing with you what I think, what can make us good again, what can still, guarantee that we will continue to be a very successful digital state, and we really will have new innovations happening and new changes happening, because right now, currently in Estonia, we are struggling a lot. I'm sure you know, we are in political crisis, we are in economical crisis. There is a hope that we will make some bold new steps again, as we did when we liberated ourselves from Soviet occupation. So this Estonia story, how it started, I think that there have been some really crucial characteristics or factors, or some of them have been really success factors which have really played crucial role in this, that we kick off with digitalization really very fast. One of the things has been, and I'm covering basically each of the, I'm a bit opening up each of those terms or words, or keywords, but really first thing you need to have very high ambition. And I think that ambition was there, and I mean absolutely undeniable, very, very high, because when we liberated from Soviet Union, I mean every single Estonian, and luckily enough our leaders had the same ambition, that we can only catch up the rest of the world if we do something differently. We need to be innovative, because usually what we see is that, well, innovation usually doesn't happen when you have too many resources. It usually happens when you don't have resources, when you need to be creative, and this ambition to catch up the rest of the world was so high. Vision, you need to have very powerful vision as a leader to make citizens also, I mean, imagine yourself back 30 years ago, we were really a poor country. I mean, everybody was struggling with food, with elementary things. And to make everybody believing in the high-level vision that if we now, I mean, we invest in technology and we will have like nice life waiting for us, it is truly amazing that this vision was believed. And courage, you had to have courage really in believing that, because when we started our technical development, there was no other example ahead of us of any country who really was implementing technology to this degree. And of course, curiosity. This is also the main driver for innovation. And well, all those, and of course, mentioning also that the vision comes true only, of course, when there are very smart decisions should follow the vision. Somehow it happens that when our first young government started, then first things they were all young guys basically, and women wanting to test, to experiment everything right now. So they were ready to test, and of course they had very, very smart advisors. You will see in this exhibition also my ex-colleague Linnar Viik, high level, I mean guys who knew at that time already everything about technology, had easy access to politicians. Politicians were trusting them. So trust is also one of the words I will be repeating today. But all those words, ambition, curiosity, and these were materialized in some first nationwide concrete projects in Estonia. You probably have heard about Tiger Leap, because by the end, this Tiger Leap has been also made basically synonym for Estonian digitalization. But this Tiger Leap meant nothing else than 1997, oh, I think it started already 96. It has been decided by government and by Lennart Meri, who was Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jaak Aaviksoo, who was Minister of Education, and Toomas Hendrik Ilves, our later president, was ambassador of Estonia in United States. And those guys were those who were leading this process. They understood that we need to have, I mean, let's start computerizing from schools. So Tiger Leap meant that back then all Estonian schools were having computer classes with free internet access to everybody. And by the end, when retrospectively we now look at this was very smart, because it kicked off very quickly then, because what happened and what happens usually, kids start to educate their parents and grandparents, and of course it was followed by also very concrete projects. I mean, one thing is to guarantee or to guarantee access, to give access to the people, but it was needed because at that time, again, Estonia was so poor, nobody had computer at home, nobody couldn't allow access or internet, and this was just to give access. Next thing you need to do is to really to guarantee that people have proper skills to use technology. So next important projects will look at the world and come along, which were to build digital skills. There were buses with teachers and computers driving across the country and giving internet courses to elderly people and to most vulnerable people. And of course in public libraries all across Estonia, in smallest villages, there were also free internet access points with also skilled people and many trainings taking place. Because again, these our leaders had very high vision and they made it also happen. It was not remaining vision. I'm still amazed about this consensus, what was possible at that time in Estonia, because now being in Estonia every day and seeing that we are actually fighting or arguing about every small detail, but at that time this consensus in society was amazing, because imagine at that time Estonian teachers their salary was like $10 per month. Estonian schools were in so bad conditions that roofs were leaking, and to sell this idea, this vision and ambition that let's invest in technology and let's have those nice internet and computer classes, and everybody was believing this, and it was happening. So this is truly amazing. I think it is very important also when we think and look at this Estonian e-story or e-Estonia story. Of course, in order to have this successful e-story or e-journey, then you need, as for any journey, you need a travel kit, right? You need, and in this case, this travel kit, which was also very, very smartly done and in place in Estonia, you need tools, services, and trust. And trust is really here highlighted, because I think this trust, when we talk about digitalization or any change, it is a key issue. Again, I'm just talking, I will tell you a few words about each, or what we mean, and concretely by these. Well, tools. By tools, I'm not going into technical details, because as I said, I'm not a technical person at all. I'm social scientist, but one of the key issues still, I mean, if we talk about digitalization, you cannot avoid technical things. Estonian key cornerstone has been this electronic ID card or digital ID, because it really enabled secure access to this Estonian ICT infrastructure. This graph here just illustrates Estonian X-Road, which is ICT infrastructure, which again, this main idea is, it is like busiest highway in Estonia. So data is moving between different data sets and registries. In most of the other countries, citizens are moving around with papers still, or printed out papers between different state authorities. In this case, in Estonian case, really, I mean, the data is moving. Citizen just enters with this piece of plastic, which is not piece of plastic, it is electronic ID card, enters this high road and gets access to also services. As far as I know, in Canada, actually Canada, as far as my Canadian friends briefed me, that Canada is one of the only countries together with Estonia who has this unique insurance number actually for every citizen, which is already good foundation or basement for digital ID, because in most countries this is not the case. So some experts have told me that in theory in Canada it would be also possible to do, I don't know, yeah, by the end it depends on political will. I know also that there are some planning of rollout of provincial digital ID program in Ontario, but not so much information about this, but still maybe there are some positive signs also. But this has been crucial, these tools and infrastructure, of course, when we talk about digitalization. But, and I'm coming to services as well, but with every service is a key basement to get citizens really using all this nice infrastructure, ID card and services is trust really. And key components or elements to build this trust is that any technical or digital development or service should be transparent. I mean, citizens do not need to be, and they are mostly not technical experts, but they should be seeing or at least have elementary understanding what is happening to their data. And of course, when we started our digital journey, citizens were not so demanding as we are now, and rightly so, because really we don't want our data to be misused. And I'm coming to that this transparency has been really guaranteed from the very beginning in Estonia. Of course, when we talk about any digital service or development, simplicity. We are not technical experts, and we don't need to be. We should be, I mean, it should be easy to motivate us to use it. And of course, skills, I already mentioned that skills are very necessary. And any country who starts this digital development or digitalization journey should be focusing on skills, because it is not obvious that people are skilled. Well, how Estonia then guaranteed that this, as I said, transparency is one of the key elements for creating trust. And well, in Estonian cases, and usually when we talk about trust and transparency, this trust has kind of two different parts. First, citizens should trust government, but at the same time they should trust technology. And I think in Estonia those both were present, because we were trusting our government. As you know, we just had, after so many occupation years, we had our own government. Finally, of course, we trust it. We probably are not trusting our government, not so much anymore, but at that time we trusted it 100%. And of course, we trusted also technology, because transparency was built in Estonian digital infrastructure and digital ecosystem from the very beginning. This is just a screenshot from my personal interface when I'm entering our Estonia.ee portal, which is access portal or landing page to access all Estonian digital services. You can see these services are basically life events of our life. Like if as you can see, if I'm sick or if I'm having baby, I'm clicking further and just arriving to the right digital service. But here, this is what shows that this is transparent. When I'm entering, and any Estonian citizen who enters or who identifies with ID card and enters this portal, I can have actually overview of all state authorities who have used and checked my data, my personal data. If you see here, this is list of one municipality who was checking my data because I did some transactions. My city, I'm coming from Tartu city. My city checked my data because, again, to provide me some sort of digital service. But I, as citizen, in Estonia from the very beginning, it is considered that citizen is the owner of the data. Yes, the state uses the data because this is my benefit that I'm getting good services from state, but I should have access and overview who is using and why my data. And me as citizen of Estonia, I can always ask those authorities and send official requests, why did you check my data? And they should give me official explanation. If I'm not happy about this, I can go to court. So this is basically guaranteed that really there is a trace behind from every transaction what is done digitally. Another thing to guarantee or to gain this trust of citizens towards digitalization, what state should or private businesses, if they are providing any digital services, but I'm now focusing more on what Estonian government concretely did, because this was still the main core of this e-Estonia story. Users are just people and citizens. All services, digital services, what are provided should be considering the user's expectations, concrete needs, context these services are provided, and of course they should be communicated in right channels, and the timing is also very important. This is just a good example that we in Estonia, we have failed also. As I said, I'm not telling only about nice things and success stories. One of the failures was when, I don't know, for some very strange reason during COVID, it was first wave of COVID when vaccines just were available for elderly people. It was like, I don't remember anymore, but it was first wave of COVID. first wave of vaccines available for elderly people 75 plus or 80 years, and for some reason leaders of social care were having the idea, said, well, let's do that registration for those vaccines will be only in e-health system, and communication to elderly people will be only in digital tools. And you can assume, you can guess what happened. That vaccines in the beginning, vaccines were not used because just the target group was somewhere else, and the communication was totally wrong. And so this can happen everywhere, and it just shows that really, I mean, when we want citizens using digital tools and digital. I mean, any service doesn't need to be digital if the users need something else, and if the expectations or habits of a citizen group is something else. And but what are really the characteristics of good digital service? Are that it should be timely, it should be dynamic in a way that, I mean, it should be updated constantly and modified, and it should be proactively provided. Again, Estonians is ICT infrastructure that, as I was showing, that data is moving. Everybody has already given state data. Actually, my city knows about me when my kid is going to school and when I'm going retired. My state has, I mean, awfully a lot of data about me. They should nowadays, technically, it is possible already proactively offer citizen services. We do not need to apply any more services. Of course, it is not happening all the time, but sometimes. And in Estonia, for instance, one very good set of services, digital services, which are really timely provided, dynamically modified and proactively provided, are all services related to childbirth. For instance, young parents, when they most probably do not want to go out or to visit any state authorities or to deal too much with bureaucracy, they rather want to be with the baby, they really get proactively already provided all set of services. Even, I mean, many of them are pre-filled, like maternity leave compensations and all this. So this is really one nice example of how you can actually be providing services. Of course, it is very important that all digital services must be built on very good service, because another example is that in Estonia also e-school works really well. But again, Estonian school system is very, very, very good. Education is very good. I mean, then it is easy because people already trust. They trust the service. They trust also the digital service built on that. And of course, one thing, this good example with child-related services and bad example of providing vaccines to elderly people only via online channels just proves that it depends also who is leading the process of services and who are the programmers. Obviously, programmers are young guys who have kids, and probably they are not those who can think what elderly people want. So this is also very important that we have this diversity. And one other good example is a set of services which are related in Estonia with vehicles and transportation services. This is again my personal interface when I'm entering this transportation office self-service portal, and I have I can do any kind of transactions very easily. I can buy, sell my car. It takes really 5 minutes. I have tried it. So I had to do it 2 years ago. And it really, because I can immediately, in the same portal system, check the data of the person who sells me the car. I even can update all my driving licenses. So again, very good example of good, well-working service. At the same time, again, my Canadian friends were telling me that in Canada, one of the worst experiences has been just recently with one online portal for registering or selling and buying cars as well. So it's this is interesting that we somehow compete in this field. That really one of the best services in Estonia do not work probably so well here. So lot to learn from Estonia for Canada. And really, I mean, the main criteria or golden rule for any digital service is that digital should solve the problems and not create new ones, which it does. And again, this smaller screenshot traffic accident submission shows that this timely or context aspect in Estonia, it was so that you could notify about the traffic accident, but it was only possible with your computer and PC. Who opens in this critical situation when you are panicking, you are just having a car accident, you are not going to open your laptop. Now this is possible all in mobile device, so because really you can already take a picture, access your documents, everything you can do in mobile, because it does make sense. It doesn't make sense to do it in computer or to provide it in computer. Again, very practical examples. And but I promised you to talk about challenges as well, what we are facing currently. One challenge, and I think that I touched upon some of them already throughout my examples, but digital vulnerability. Nobody should be left behind when doing this digitalization. It is happening so fast, all these technical developments. We as countries, we as governments should think all the time that nobody is left behind. Cyber resilience, we all are. We are very, very real or possible or potential victims of cybercrime all the time, or manipulated easily in online channels. And finally, also in Estonian case as well, most of the Estonian digital services, they are just developed and designed without engaging users too much. So nowadays we should pay much more focus on when developing our digital systems and states that citizens and end users are engaged and also participating actively. And just few words about each of those challenges or some more examples. That what I mean by digital vulnerability, this is first thing is connectivity. I know that, well, something is similar between Canada and Estonia as well, that we are sparsely inhabited countries. We need to guarantee access. In Estonian case, these are women from Kihnu Islands, and we need to guarantee that people living in small islands or in mountains, they do have the same level of access. They have access. They will be also provided proper skills, and so this connectivity. And I said that these cyber threats, when we talk about cyber threats, and I mean it is interesting that nowadays. Not traditionally marginalized or vulnerable groups are necessarily the most digitally vulnerable or potential victims of cyber attacks. Quite the contrary. On the contrary, because, for instance, some elderly people who are well connected but do not have proper awareness, probably, or younger people who are not aware of all cyber threats, they are even easier targets to misinformation and disinformation and propaganda. So we now, my team and my organization, we work a lot with those topics in countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, who are under concrete threat all the time, coming from Kremlin, from Moscow, because really we need to make sure that they are young people who are very well connected and very well have some degree of the digital tools, that they are aware of all those risks. So this digital vulnerability is becoming more and more important. And what I mean that citizens should be engaged also in designing services, but also engaged in making main decisions in cities, in government. I mean, citizens nowadays do not want to be passive recipients, not passive recipients of services or not policies. They want to say their word. And I'm coming from Tartu City. It's nice to be here in this building, which has the same name and tag, but Tartu City in Estonia is really good example of understanding this as city, what means and how much more wisdom and collective wisdom you get from citizens to make your decisions smarter, to engage citizens. Tartu City will be next year's European Cultural Capital 2024, and basically the whole cultural program is co-created with citizens. There have been so many engagement projects and debates, public debates and initiatives where citizens have provided the ideas, and these will be implemented about concerts, exhibitions, everything. So. And because by the end, smart city is not a city which uses only technologies, but smart city is with smart people. And of course, it is very easy to engage nowadays using technology, citizens in making the place, in participate in urban planning, which is because we do care how our cities look like. Toronto is absolute. I'm impressed of Toronto for being so big city. It is so green, so walkable, so runnable. So and I think that the city government of Toronto does great job, and Tartu has also understood that citizens are interested in participating. Like some years ago, there was one group of artists who proposed what to do with ugly Soviet-era blockhouses, just to paint them, to make them nicer, because we still, unfortunately, have so many of them. So this is definitely one area where, with technology, you can engage so much better citizens. And we, with my team, we just recently also experimented how to engage citizens using technical platforms to crowdsource ideas, to let them propose or signal or identify problems regarding the air pollution. We did concrete exercise with Tallinn and 5 other European cities. We asked citizens how to say, what is the biggest polluter for them in Tallinn, in other cities. Then they proposed solutions how to solve those wicked problems. And I was surprised how concrete, how well argumented citizens were. They proposed like charge city entry or built, or say also pinpointed very concrete streets which needs to be reorganized, because other way they are, traffic on them is big polluter. So you actually, with the help of technology, can engage meaningfully citizens in really solving very, very wicked and complicated problems. Finally, this is also in Estonia, one Estonian example about e-petitions. In Estonia, there is more and more still this civic activism evident, but some cities, government sometimes tends to ignore this, that citizens are actually more and more active in fighting for their rights. So we have this central e-petition portal where you can, every single Estonian citizen can start one e-petition, and once you collect to your initiative more than 1,000 digital signatures, then it goes already to Parliament for the normal parliamentary proceeding and reading. And there is one good example of how, it cuts a bit, it is how active Estonians have become, because just a few weeks ago, citizens digitally protested against new potential car tax our government is trying to implement. More than, you cannot see because it's somehow cut, but almost 80,000 digital signatures were collected from citizens. And on those images you can see how association of car owners was handing them over to our speaker, and this shows really that citizens are very, very ready to be very active and using also technical tools to show their civic activism. And finally, I also promised to tell you a bit or a few words of about what I think or how we can make how we can update our, let's say, our digital government and digital society, and what makes us really good. And here, unfortunately, I have to display this image from Ukraine, but good thing is that, I mean, it is said that you are good professor or teacher if your students are better than you. And in case of Ukraine, there is no other country in the world right now which proves how important digitalization is than Ukraine, because they have been very good students. They have learned a lot from us, but they adopted many things from Estonia, but they modified, they updated, they used already newer technology, and now they are much better than us. And of course, this digitalization helps them to be more resilient, resistant. And just one example, we in Estonia, we talk a lot about, now we have all our services here in this PC, or this is Mac, but in PC and computer, but we need to go also to mobile phones, because most of the people still, I mean, do expect to have everything already in their pocket. Ukraine did this. They have a wonderful DIA application, which means basically that all their e-state is in their mobiles. This is, and more than half of Ukrainians, it means more than 20 million people are using this every day. It connects to all databases. It has, you can prove your identity, you can apply for any kind of services using this. And now Estonian government is learning back from Ukraine how to do this, because it is obviously something what we should also implement. And what is also the nowadays sad context, but at the same time it shows how important these new digital tools are. The same app, for instance, enables citizens of Ukraine to inform government about movements of enemy and report on really where the enemy's troops are moving, so really saves lives quite literally. And now, a few weeks ago, I was presented in Tallinn Digital Summit a new platform with wonderful name, Dream of Ukraine, where they have already technical platform ready, that when this terrible war is going to end, then this platform already has functionalities to plan renovations or rebuildings. This collects also data from different data sets about what is destroyed, collects data from immigration authorities, where are more citizens coming back, about pollution. So basically a digital tool which helps them to build and rebuild their cities, their state, and to make it in a very transparent way, because now I'm coming back to the transparency issue. Of course, Ukraine is struggling with big corruption. We can only assume and imagine how big threat this corruption will be when the money is going for rebuilding, but they already think, and this is already built into this system. And yes, I would love to end my presentation with this nice dream that indeed Ukraine will be rebuilt one day, and I was not talking about artificial intelligence, and I'm not going to, because you will hear this all the time. I just hope that, and we cannot of course ignore this. This is coming, this is there. I just hope that not everything, because technically there are no limits anymore in the world. I mean, sky is limit. I just hope that these technical systems are not taking over our lives, but say save our time, say save us from stupid and boring things and help us to be better humans. Thank you.
Aitäh, Kristiina, väga huvitav ettekanne, very interesting indeed. We have some time for questions, and I'd like to come with mic so we can record what you say.
Hello, Krista, thank you very much. I see, I think, an old man in front of me that I recognize from his hair, architect. I don't know what's going to turn around in a second. How's it going? Okay. And I'm working in Estonia and Ukraine, so it's very cool to see that two countries that you would not think of as tech leaders are actually the two tech leaders globally now working together. So people thought I was crazy when I went to Ukraine, but now it's cool to see this. With DIA, the rolling out of the app, Ukrainians are, if I'm not mistaken, the top users of the digital ID card system as well in Estonia. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Ukrainians were, prior to the adoption of their system, the top users of the ID card. Is that correct globally? And you guys have done stuff in Jamaica, I think, as well. There are no Jamaicans there. But with the DIA app, if I have a Ukrainian social security number or a tax ID, which I do, and an Estonian one, do you think it'll be a day when the one DIA app is, let's say, transparent across two countries?
Yeah, well, as said, I'm not technically, I cannot say it technically, but I don't think that it is by the end. It's still kind of possible to connect them technically. I mean, those two applications, by the end there is, I mean, technically probably yes. I mean, usually when we talk about digitalization, this technology is the easiest part, but of course the most complicated part usually is legislation, and this is totally different, and you know, rules and well, nowadays all our new digital developments, they are, of course, we need to fulfill all European Union regulations and so on, so they until now still do have different regulations. So yeah, well, I don't know exactly really how well combinable those two are, but knowing also that we have Finnish friends here, I was just, you know, reflecting that actually Estonia and Finland are the countries, the only ones as far as I know, who really do those cross-border applications, because between Finland and Estonia, some data is already moving, like tax data, health data, because I have never tested it, but in theory, and I know it should be working, that if I go to Helsinki, to pharmacy, I should be able to buy my medicine, my prescription, if my medical doctor or my family doctor has prescribed me. So yeah, so I know that some data is moving in European Union and Commission has been talking about this since years, that between European countries data should be moving, but it is not moving. So.
Thank you. In Ukraine, you don't need a prescription for anything, so they don't need that app.
So Peter has a question.
I wanted to carry on with the theme of healthcare, because your emphasis on trust, I think, was extremely well put. And one of the things that has challenged the Canadian healthcare system, especially here in Ontario, is patient mistrust of how data will be used. You gave an excellent example of how that theoretically works in Estonia. My question is, what happens when you look at your healthcare record, realize that somebody illegally has accessed it? Are there cases? What happens to those people? What happens in court? Could you give us some context in terms of what really is happening on the ground? Because otherwise, the system that you have in Estonia is marvelous. It is a world leader in e-health technology, and And I'm always wondering about the dark side. Are there people that illegally access the information, and then what happens to them in the legal process?
Yeah, well, good question, thank you. Well, I don't know any concrete case from e-health sector. I mean that it has been really like misused in purpose or purposefully somebody's data, but just very recently, I think it was just last week, I heard about this, and it was in Estonian media, that actually some person discovered when entering his health data, that he could see somebody else's data as well, or some, summary, or just, some description of somebody else's family doctors. But it came out that, yeah, there was some leaking, but it was not, I mean, somebody was not big harm was done, but at the same time it shows that I mean, there is always trace behind, so it was easy to go back to this where it started, and I think that it was just some, technical error why it happened, but not, I mean, somebody's bad intention. But coming back to your question, I do remember one case from other sector where really somebody was misusing his position. It was in police a few years ago. Some police officer was using his position basically and entering the system to check some data of his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend or whatever the story was behind, something similar. And this indeed came out because, again, I mean, digitally there is always trace behind. So, and then of course this person got punished and all that, and it somehow even increased the trust, because really, I mean, even first try was coming out. So. Yeah, I think that there are not so many cases, because Estonia, by the end, as you know, is a very small society. We immediately hear about those cases, so not so many, really.
One here, Peter.
Yes, thank you for a very terrific presentation. You noted the importance of communications and how that impacts on acceptance and transparency. And I guess my question for you is with regard to e-voting, and which is one of the more fundamental processes concerned with governance and fundamental to democratic processes. One of the leaders of the major political parties in Estonia, Martin Helme, has quite frequently questioned the legitimacy and security of e-voting in Estonia, whereas, and has gone as far as saying that it's a disgrace to the Estonian Republic, which, given everything that you talked about, how it's been put in, how e-governance has been put in place in the country, just is in direct contradiction or contrast to that. But I guess my question for you would be, given that he is who he is, does his view have any real traction with the public in general?
Yeah, well, it's there's a really, I mean, I could give many reflections to this, but really I'm not going to comment on who is really questioning this. Well, I think quite honestly that there could be more transparency, really. I mean, again, I'm going back to what I said, that it should be, of course, we are not experts, but it should be as simply explained, the whole process of e-voting, as possible and as transparently. Of course, I mean, me and my colleagues and who are more involved in this digitalization, and so we totally believe this, and we see that, I mean, by the end, I mean, we trust our money to e-banking, and so, I mean, I think in Estonian case still, I mean, I mean, our vote, so to say, costs for most people less than the money or €1. So we can trust, but of course, I understand that if this coming out or popping up with each elections, this same topic and same same hesitation, same stories and same gossips or whatever you call them, then it needs to be explained better and or shown. I know, I mean, it doesn't convince, but at the same time, I know experts who have been telling that actually they are opening up all those procedures as much as it is possible after elections, after voting are collected, also digital electronic voting. There is our election committee makes basically public events, public, so to say, readings. Of course, this is not like one vote, other votes. This is all, I mean, technical, decrypting and encrypting. Of course, it does not go to any individual vote, but basically opening up it technically as possible. But those people, those critics are not going there. They just, you know, they just like to criticize somewhere else, but they are not. So at the same time, I think that you cannot convince people who are making this as their individual political agenda, and they are just, you know, gaining some votes if they keep talking and keep having the same agenda. So there is like several answers to your question, basically.
I often talk to people here in Canada about e-Estonia, and one of the things I tell them, and I'm hopefully I'm telling them the truth, is that that system has never been hacked. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I told this just a few moments ago about this tries that somebody already went to the system with bad intentions and even this story was coming out. So no, as far as we know, and plus I think that 2007, when you probably know about Bronze Night and you know those riots which were happening in Tallinn after removing the bronze soldier, but what was followed were followed cyber attacks towards the system, towards all state authorities, basically towards the same system, because state authorities do use the same system, and nothing dramatic was happening. So this system proves to be really resilient. And after this, NATO Cybersecurity Center was built and established in Tallinn, because we just proved to be able to build a very secure system already back in 20.
Now that was what they call a denial of access attack, and they never really penetrate any of the systems. They just bombard them so that they break, so they just crash. I would imagine that Putin has been trying, and his hordes have been trying for a long time to disrupt the Estonian system. So it sounds like they never have succeeded.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely brilliant point now, because I think that I also somebody, I mean, some foreigners always asking the same question, that how can you be sure? And I think that I also told somebody similarly that believe us if really, I mean, Putin would be the first trying this out or testing this out, and probably it is resilient enough. So hope those questions.
Thank you. Great presentation. It's really fantastic, very impressive, everything you've done in Estonia to digitize the government. I want to say that. And thank you for enlightening us. My question is about AI. So there's a lot of talks about AI at the moment, AI and data, and you talked a lot about data. And there are some conversations in Canada about how to put in place legislations that's not going to slow down innovation, but still provide some guardrail for anything that could happen. And I think I relate very well to your current slide at the moment. So I'd like to have your thoughts, because Canada is looking very much at the same approach as Europe. It's about principle-based. And I'd like to have your thoughts about that.
Well, Estonia is still, I think we are still doing first baby steps in this. We have wonderful AI strategy, which called bureaucrat is one, mystical animal in our fairy tales, and so on. Comes bureaucracy, so that somebody who takes bureaucracy away, and this strategy is there, very nice document. As far as I know, we have our government and different government offices have some quite successful use cases, and for instance, especially in social care systems, in social care system there are already some use cases when algorithms are basically, reaching out those vulnerable persons who have just very recently became unemployed and already, proactively proposing some vacancies, and so this kind of things that these have been tested and I think quite successfully, but we are still in experimental phase, I think, as a country. So, but some of those proactive services, I mean, of course, they were basically launched when AI was not, at least nobody was talking about AI, but in principle they are basically like AI, that some proactive, because thanks again that all data is collected and in the one system, and all databases are interacting with each other, it is possible to offer proactively services, and to some extent this is also works as AI. So yeah, but I think that we are also looking at new international best practices, because we are, this is now the moment when I say that we are somehow still a bit stagnated as well, that new steps are coming much harder to us for us than our initial kickoff steps.
So, great presentation, great discussions. Thank you for questions and thank you for answers, and thanks for coming again really in such a short notice. We appreciate very much. Thank you. Yeah. In addition to the abundant selection of black rye bread and my closest people in Estonia, I also very much miss Eesti living in Canada. The first elections in Canada where I was able to participate had a time travel effect. I was brought back to the envelopes, pens, ballot boxes, so on. All this was a distant history for me, because since 2005, when the first elections took place in Estonia, I've been fulfilling my civic duty to Estonia online, always. Also from here, from Canada. Communication with Canadian government offices is a night and day difference from Estonian ones. Estonia has a reason to be proud. It is good to feel that we are not longer in the role of a recipient, but that Estonia has a lot to offer the world, including the part of the world that we call developed. The exhibition that we are opening today tells you the story of how Estonian SSR became e-Estonia. And to explain how this exhibit came to be and what it tries to accomplish, we are very happy to have here Karen Jagodin, who has worked in the field of art and culture since 2005. From the year we had first e-elections in Estonia. She graduated from the Estonian Academy of Art in the Art Theory and University College London Bartlett School of Architecture with an MA in Architectural History. Before joining Vabamu Museum, Karen worked at the Museum of Estonian Architecture and the Estonian Maritime Museum, and has led major projects of the museum scene. She's a member of the Estonian Museum Association and the Estonian Society of Art Historians and Curators. And she's also the author of the idea of this exhibit, which you will find out more about now. Karen, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, the ambassador, the people of Tartu College and Vemo. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to open the exhibition. I will now zoom out from this detailed and specific talk about how the digital society works in Estonia and try to answer more about the question why we are talking about this, why we are having these presentations and discussions. What's the story behind that? Vabamu, the Museum of Occupations, has been running for 20 years now in Estonia. We are celebrating the 20th anniversary. And as the name suggests, we are speaking about both the occupations and also the freedom. These are like the two sides of one coin. Without understanding what it means to lose your freedom and to be occupied, you need to understand what it means to have your freedom and be a free country. So one is the opposite of the other, but to value the freedom that we have right now, we have to understand our past and our history and the time when we were not free. And for now, everything we do is always based on our very simple mission, which is never again. So memorizing and commemorating our past and telling the stories of the people who have been repressed or who have fled the country, who have resisted or who have collaborated is part of understanding why we are right now the country that we are. But we have been independent now for more than 30 years again, so our story did not end in 1991, and more people are starting to ask that what happened next, what happened with the next 30 years. And this exhibition is actually a first try to put together a narrative of what Estonia has become within the last 30 years, that we have done something with our independence. And this is something that really differentiates also Estonia from several other countries. Unfortunately, a lot of countries have suffered in the recent past. A lot of countries can share the story of being occupied and being repressed, but not everybody can share the story of recovery. And this is something that Estonia has, a story of recovery, and part of that story is the story how we became a digital nation, how we became a digital society. You can argue if it is a success story, you can argue whether the story has really reached all of its citizens, but it is a story that we all relate to, more or less. We relate as citizens, we relate as a country, and for example, you all know Estonians, we like to compare ourselves to our neighbors and especially to Latvians. And Latvians really are annoyed that they don't have this one narrative they can relate to. Like, we Latvians have become this within the last 30 years. And we can say, oh, but we have this narrative. We have the story of digital society. We have the story of e-success story. So it is something that we can now start to research and really try to understand what happened. A lot of the reasons were already brought up also in the presentation, what made it possible. But this is an exhibition that tries to give also one approach to this story, that how did it become possible that a former USSR country became a digital superstar, a digital governance. And to put this exhibition together, we first started to work with the idea at the museum, and I wrote down some first concepts of possible topics that would be covered. But it was clear that we need an expert who would curate the exhibition into its final stages. And when you are dealing with recent history, you are dealing with a lot of individuals who might have agendas towards that story as well. And you cannot pick somebody who would be bringing onto the table a very personal narrative that they want to push forward. So I chose Henrik Roonemaa as the curator of the exhibition because he has been working as a journalist for decades in Estonia in covering the process of digitization and becoming a digital country. And he really went into researching the different stories and the different approaches of how to form that exhibition. And I have been very glad to see how many talks and discussions this exhibition has brought along. A lot of people have come to the exhibition and said like, no, this is not how it happened that way. No, this was not the person who decided that, I was the person who decided that. So this just gives meat to the bones that it is a living history, it is a living recent history, and this is our duty to collect these stories and to collect that data, because unfortunately you won't have those people around forever who are part of creating that change in the society. And that's why also Vabamu has now decided to collect that story as part of its collections. So we have gained already first physical artifacts, but also we are getting more into oral history and stories about how this change came to life in Estonia. So it is a history exhibition. It's more about what were the preconditions in the society that led to this change. And it's a lot about trying to understand what happened. So it's again about the trust, it's about this catching this momentum in the society. It's about decisions that were made in a small society that had very large impact. So as a small country, you can do things that have very big impact, like giving access to public internet points in the libraries, or giving access to all school kids to computers and the internet, or giving ID card to everybody and making it mandatory for all the citizens to have the ID card at their hands. So it's the way that these decisions and these momentums play their role, but it's also about this huge Estonian stubbornness to push through, and it's also a story about how it sometimes is really good to be poor, to not have legacy, to not have those systems in the society and the legacy in the society where people come to tell you like, this is the way we have always done and this is the way we will keep on doing things. So these are some of the answers that you can find from the exhibition. So it starts with actually going back to the late 50s, beginning of 60s, because there was a very good level of education in sciences in Estonia that provided people access to technology, and this mindset of trial and error, that you can build something, you can fail, you can try again. There is a big part of the exhibition that also tries to explain the startup sector in Estonia that is becoming a huge income for the country. And as a small society, these people are all connected. And there is a map of Estonian mafia on the exhibition. And the Estonian mafia is a nickname to the group of people who worked in Silicon Valley in the beginning of 2000s and created first great unicorns. Like Skype, you must know, like Wise, the former TransferWise, or the Bolt. And if you look at the actual people behind all these companies, you see that they are connected. You make one great unicorn, the people move on, create new companies, but it's like an invisible network of people who are intertwined, who are networking, who know each other, and as a small society and small country, they stick together. So you do one company together, you move on, you do another one with somebody else, and your fourth or fifth company can be again together with somebody who you did your first one together with. And you can trace down these actual people in Estonia. And the very end of the exhibition then raises the question of where we are at the moment. So what are the new initiatives or the latest initiatives by the Estonian government? I hope you all know that even if you are not Estonian citizen, you can become Estonian e-citizen, you can become e-resident of Estonia. So there is a little part about that. The future healthcare, e-healthcare, which is based on the biobank of Estonia, which is a very unique and one of the earliest biobanks in the world that we have in Estonia. And then also, as mentioned before, the bureaucrat, the proactive AI-based system that as a citizen, government already has my data, they know when my kids are going to school, or they know a lot more about me, then they can already proactively provide me services that I don't have to apply to. So it's a journey from late 50s, beginning of 60s until nowadays, and I hope it gives you a rather good overview of what was there specifically Estonian in Estonia that made this digital society and the birth of this society possible in Estonia. So I hope you have all time today to look around, and if you have any questions or comments after you have looked at the exhibition, don't hesitate to approach me and ask them. Thank you.
Please come back on Wednesday evening, because Karen would talk more about Vabamu's doings and about all those 20 years, also those discussions about your new name, which also became a problem for some people here, but now I think Vabamu has shown that the new name has a new energy behind it, really, and it shows. But now we are ready for some very Estonian klingel and some other finger food and some wine. So, palju õnne Tartu College, happy birthday Tartu College. And that's only the beginning of our new season here, so please follow us on vemu.ca. Please become a member of our mailing list. If you want to support us, you can also make a transaction using new technology here. So thanks for coming, aitäh tulemast, and happy birthday Tartu College.